You think about it, you're like, what can I do next to help the city? What can I do next to help the artists and the creatives that are coming out of here? And if I don't do it, who is? There was a point where I was in a boat with two other people who were like, okay, let's carry the city on our back. Let's change the infrastructure of this place, start doing this from the ground up. And now it's like, there's more people who are involved and have that mentality and who are willing to put in the work and dedicate their souls to. Really, it is a soul-searching kind of quest. I'm Erin Ashley, and I'm the hip-hop editor for Exclaim magazine, cultural critic, and community advocate for Toronto. I was actually born here. I am one of the few of my cousins that were born here as opposed to South Africa. But I do have dual citizenship, and that was given to me when I was born. That was one of the first things my parents did. And then the first time I went back was when I was 9 months, so close to home regardless. So during the time when my parents decided to move, they had two choices. They had Australia or they had Canada. I had a great uncle that was here, and this is also during apartheid. So, they had to leave. They didn't want to grow a family in a country where it was still segregated, and they made a decision that they were going to go from a South African summer to a Canadian winter, specifically in Winnipeg. And, that's where my great uncle was. They lived there for a few months and they said, no, we can't do this winter. We're going to move to Toronto. So growing up here, I think with my parents not being able to do so much of what they wanted to do, they kind of pushed university on me very hard. They pushed this idea of being everything that they couldn't, whether it was going to be a pilot, this massive lawyer or doctor, the typical African jobs that people choose. As a kid, I wanted to be a cartoon illustrator, and it was heavily influenced by this South African book that we had, half a Mandela cartoon, half this weird auntie cartoon. And I remember just reading it, I kind of love this. I really want to do this, but that didn't work out. Wasn't a viable career in my parents' eyes, which is fine. And then I started to get into more creative fields, which led me to writing. That's still not something that they understand as to what I do. It's still a creative career that doesn't necessarily have a 9-to-5 title. It doesn't really have a title in general. So I think over the years, I've taken what they've told me in terms of make a good career for yourself, but applied it to the creative field. So everything that they expect, I can do with what I love. I made the choice that I did career-wise based on what they said, but also just based on what I knew I loved to do. With them not being able to do so much of what they wanted to do growing up, like my dad, he really wanted to be a pilot, but apartheid wouldn't let him. And that's something that he would have loved to do. When I say I love something, they take that with respect. They're not gonna force another career onto me. So I think that has a huge role as to how I, started to navigate my career and where I went from stage to stage. I think one of the most challenging things about growing up here for me was an identity issue. When we look at South Africa, there's this whole other race that, it's called colored, and it's still very much intertwined with the government and with what happens in society. For me, I grew up being, told I was a colored child, and that was something that was so incredible, and it was a very cultural statement for my family until I was 13 when I realized, oh, that's not actually a great word in North America. It has a lot of, a history behind it. So that's when I started to realize okay, so I'm colored in this one country, and the only country in the world where I'm colored, and then I'm considered Black everywhere else, or if not Black, it's just a gamble as to what I may be. So that's one of the biggest challenges that I've always faced is that self-identity issue. And there's a great documentary that I once saw. It was called I'm Not Black, I'm Colored. It took on all those challenges and put them into this documentary. Realistically, if you take the word colored and what that represents in South Africa, it's several different races of people. I have family that looks darker than me. I have family who looks, more brown than me. I have family who's lighter than me. If we were ever to break down that colored term and start dividing ourselves into different races, my family would be lost. That's a crazy concept to think about. But now I know, at the 2016 Olympics, there was a colored athlete, a runner, who won gold, and it raised the question of, can we start adopting this idea that Black people are colored people as well, which is a new conversation. And apartheid only ended in 1994. It's a very new conversation, and I think it's an identity crisis throughout South Africa in general. And for me, growing up here, being told one thing, and knowing something else in another country, that's massive, and I've adapted to it. I know what to say and how to say it. The colored culture is who I am, and that's how I was raised. But in terms of race, it's a different world when I'm in Canada. And then as a woman, especially as a Black woman in Toronto, in rap, in the Canadian music industry, there's not too many of us that are doing something in a power position. And I think I'm one of the few who are there, specifically related to rap and R&B. And I'm grateful for that. But, you know, I always think back, I'm like, once I go home, once I go to South Africa, I'm still, you know, a colored girl. My proudest moment and the best decision I ever made was to not quit when I first started working in the music industry. When I first started, there were even less opportunities. You know, Drake hadn't popped off yet. We weren't that city that people were looking at when it came to investing in us, when it came to artists popping out, even writing. We weren't that city. I started writing with an American website first and then realized, no, I have to bring that back home and start giving our city the same energy. And there's so many moments where I wanted to quit. There's so many years where I was not paid. So many. Every time I wanted to quit, there's so many times I've chosen to not give up, and that's probably the best decision that I've made so far. It's led me to so many opportunities, whether that's, you know, creating showcases in other cities, becoming the editor that I am, working on the Netflix documentary. There's so many things that have happened because I chose not to give up on this career and this city. I went to university for communications, and then I had another major. It was called Fine Arts Cultural Studies. Essentially, it took anthropology, sociology, poli-sci, all the ologies, and put them towards cultural studies and performance arts. I chose to make that entire major about hip hop. Every essay that I ever gave to that school, it was a rap essay. It was either about graffiti in New York and the political side of it, or slave names and how rappers who choose their names, there's a correlation between that. There's so many things that are important to explore when it comes to hip hop culture that it was easily done through academia. But did it help my career? Did anybody ever ask me for my degree? No. Absolutely not. I think they asked for experience first, but what university did teach me, and this is really what I made out of it, is all the knowledge that I needed to know to go get that experience in the first place, is where I found, you know, my strength in university. Where the drive comes from? God, that's a crazy question. So to be blunt, I didn't grow up in Toronto. I grew up on the outskirts of the city, but I think the drive that I have to put artists on, and not put them on in a way that like I'm doing you a favor, but, you know, creating platforms for artists to explore, comes from just a need to do something and make an impact and leave a legacy. Nobody really helped me coming up. There wasn't somebody who mentored me. I found my mentors, quote unquote mentors, in people who didn't live in Canada, in a lot of OGs, and in a Combat Jack, or in, you know, even in Elliot Wilson. Like, I found my mentors in other people, and they were usually men as well. So when I saw young girls coming up, and, you know, who are they turning to? There are people that are mentoring young girls, but at the same time, the platforms aren't there for them to keep moving. To see that there's no way that artists can create this career that they deserve is really what the drive for me is to create that branch, corporate to community, to create the bridge from Toronto to the States. Overall, just make a life better for us and easier for us so that we don't have to leave home to create a good life and career for ourselves. I didn't come this far to only come this far. It means that no matter what I achieve, there's still so far to go. Whether I, you know, dream big, I can always dream bigger. I look at my parents and I think about how far they've come. And, you know, they came a long way from apartheid, and they have a long way to go still. The country still has a long way to go. So regardless of like how far we have come, there's still so much to do. And that's just life. It's consistently evolving, that's life. My one message that I have for everybody is that identity is never permanent and it's always evolving. You know, there's so many different parts of us that consistently change, and that's fine and that's okay. And it's, you know, it could be scary, but that is a part of who you're becoming. And, you know, that's a massive part of who you are, is your everyday changing and everyday evolving into a better person, and knowing what you need versus what you want. That's a massive thing as well when it comes to your identity. My name is Erin Ashley, and I didn't come this far to only come this far.